Like many others, we enjoy watching Jim's videos. He is a great storyteller. The format, the way that he presents his questions, argument, and the results are such a joy. We genuinely respect what Jim is trying to do in the audio engineering space. A lot of recording, mixing, analog gear, console, cable, converter, and vintage tone discussions are full of repeated claims that often survive because they sound plausible, not because they have been properly tested. Even when every test is not perfect, the act of questioning these assumptions, measuring them, demonstrating them, and pushing people towards evidence instead of folklore is valuable. His work encourages a healthier engineering mindset. Listen, test, measure, compare, and be willing to challenge expensive myths. That is a positive contribution to the community, especially in a field where subjective experience, marketing language, and technical reality are often mixed together too casually. Whilst watching his latest video on "Where does the tone come from in a microphone preamp?", Jim recounts an interaction with an engineer who shared a claim from his boss regarding console tone. Not everyone may have paid attention, but this is towards the end of the video, around 46 minutes and 2 seconds.
I had an engineer once tell me that his boss told him that phase differences in frequencies above 20 kilohertz can combine in ways that affect frequencies under 20 kilohertz, and that's the sound of a console. This is just made up. It's based on literally nothing true.
The boss claimed that phase differences in frequencies above 20 kilohertz can combine in ways that somehow affect the audible frequencies below 20 kilohertz, and that this interaction is the sound of a console. Jim strongly refutes this, describing it made up, based on no factual or scientific evidence. He explains that individual waves combine to form the final signal that reaches the ear, and humans cannot perceive relative phase changes in different frequency ranges in the way the claim suggests. He notes that while relative phase changes might look different on an oscilloscope, they do not result in a different audible sound. Jim is mostly right, but either the assistant or the boss's claim may be confusing two different phenomena. What does that mean? There are two areas that needs further explanation. If we are talking about sub-ultrasonic frequencies, rather than frequencies outside of human hearing range, then the story has a slight twist. With 9 kHz and 10 kHz, for instance, relative phase changes can affect the audible waveform or beating perception because those tones are audible. But in a linear system, this is still superposition, not frequency conversion. Which brings us to the perhaps potentially misunderstood section. If the assistant's boss was actually talking about frequencies rather than phase, the whole story then is not made up, especially when you consider the reference to the console sound, which is actually indirectly supports the argument of the entire video, which Jim is trying to refute. What exactly are we talking about? As we said before, two sine waves, one at 24 kHz and the other at 25 kHz, which are outside of the human range, would show as two individual spikes on an oscilloscope if they pass through a linear mic preamp. However, if you introduce non-linearity or drive the preamps, you will start seeing artifacts within human hearing range. Wait, what? Two adjacent frequencies can produce an undertone when they pass through a non-linear system. For instance, you may see on an oscilloscope and, above all, hear 1 kHz when 25 kHz and 24 kHz goes through a non-linear system. Listener warning. This demo includes high-frequency tones, intermodulation tests, distortion, and sounds that may feel unpleasant or fatiguing at higher volumes. Please lower your playback level before continuing, especially if you are listening on headphones. Sounds interesting and worth spending some time on that. Let's prove or disprove that. It is very easy to demonstrate. Here is Logic Pro. We will be sharing this project with you later on. We got two channels. Channel 1 is sine wave A and channel 2 is sine wave B. The channel 1 has a test oscilloscope plug-in. The sine wave at 20 kHz. One thing to bear in mind is that this oscilloscope has a limitation. It cannot generate more than 20 kHz, which was mentioned in the story. But it should not matter for the purpose of the test. And we also have a gain plugin, which later on we will phase invert to see if that makes a difference. We can in fact set to any frequencies, not just 20 kHz. This channel is sending output to bus 2. There is no reduction in gain. It's just that at 0 decibels. Let's switch to channel 2. Track B is exactly the same, and it has a test oscilloscope plug-in as well, but in this case, we have 19 kHz. Both channels are producing sine waves at -12 decibels. Again, sending to bus 2 at 0 decibels. So let's look at what third track is doing. It is receiving from bus 2. It is the summing bus, basically. And we have a bunch of distortion plugins here: clip distortion, distortion, and chromo glow, which is, I think, the latest addition in Logic Pro. And then we have obviously the channel EQ, which we can see the effects, if any. Here is what we are going to be doing. Send both frequencies to the summing bus, check what we are seeing and hearing, and then apply these drive plugins and see if the phenomenon is correct. Okay, let's go. Let's initiate the first test oscilloscope. Remember that this is at 20 kHz. We are not hearing it for obvious reasons, but the EQ is showing us. And let's initiate the second test oscilloscope, which is 19 kHz. Okay, we have it over there. Fine. So, the core question is, when the frequencies outside or close to outside of the human range exists, can they introduce artifacts below those frequencies? Just an important note, we are not testing the phase argument here. It is frequencies we are concerned of. In addition to this, is there some truth to the console effect? So what is a console effect? Console effect, which I presume is referring to, is Neve-style vintage consoles channels, or any channels which is known to produce harmonics, or warmth, however you want to describe them. Meaning, largely transformers being driven and producing non-linear effects. In addition to this single channel effect, then multiple channels aggregate these effects, and the summing bus has the imprint of a sound which is not an exact, or transparent, copy of the actual sound which the engineers are trying to capture. I think that's what the assistant boss was talking about. Sounds like something was lost in translation. So, as you can see, there are no artifacts. We sending 2 frequencies here, and that's what we are seeing. This is perfectly linear. Now, the reason that we have all these plugins are, they're introducing this, or supposedly non-linearities, okay? And let's start with the first one. Before that, let's go to the project settings, audio, and our sample rate is the highest possible, just in case. Let's click on the first plugin. Let's dial down the drive. So here, we're mixing it at 100%. So original signal is not going to be mixed. As soon as we enable the plugin, so input gain is at 0 or whatever it comes, we are not boosting or, cutting, and the drive is at 0. Okay, let's go. There we go. We're hearing something. It's coming out at 1 kHz exactly, and there is no additional drive, just the assumed drive circuit. There's the drive at 0. Nothing special is going on. And if we disable it, nothing. That means that there is some validity to this argument. Let's increase the drive and see whether there are other frequencies coming up. Yeah, there are. Not just at 1 kHz, but there are frequencies other than 1K. So let's explore. So one interesting fact is the difference between the 20 kHz and 19 kHz is 1 kHz, which is exactly what we're seeing here. I will just dial down the drive here, and despite the fact that the other frequencies are disappearing, we still have 1 kHz. Let's dial this down to 18K. which means that the difference is 2K, and let's see whether we will be able to see that 2K difference in here, okay? There we go. There's a clear 2K difference. So the difference between these two frequencies is generating a new frequency. There's also this extra set of sub-frequencies, below 75 Hz. We will ignore that for a moment, but this is quite interesting. So I'm just going to stop one of the sine generators, and let's see whether we will still see that 2K. That's interesting. We're not seeing any additional artifacts apart from this one, which is probably because of the drive itself. And when we disable the drive, it goes away. Okay, let's enable the second sine generator. When we enable them, and when there isn't any, nonlinear effects on the summing bus, this is the most important part, you don't see those effects. But when you enable nonlinearities, then there you go. You have the artifacts showing up. I would like to, for a moment, test the polarity. So because Jim is also referring to what is called the phase shift, so not just the frequencies, but also the phase shift can introduce these things. Alright, so let's enable the nonlinearity. And there we go, we have that difference. And let's change this phase. Shifting the phase. Nothing is happening. This phenomenon, nothing to do with that. So, we tested two frequencies with close to human range. I mean, there is nothing special going on here. He was about that. At least with this simple test, there is no discernible sonic difference. Let's test frequencies more in the audible range. And in order to do that, I'm just going to disable the two oscillators and to adjust the frequencies. Let's go down to one of them to 1 kHz, and the other one is 2 kHz. Then I'm going to enable them, and it's going to be slightly loud. We are able to clearly see them, and let's introduce the drives. We've introduced nonlinearities, but hang on a minute. So there are some harmonics beyond 2K, but we are not seeing any harmonics below these frequencies. What's going on? A few minutes ago, what we said, there's one specific condition that needs to be met. I'll just stop the test. So, this is called intermodulation distortion, also known as IMD. IMD creates new tones based on the sum and difference of the original frequencies. The difference between the two frequencies, or the frequencies that you have in the system, matters. It doesn't have to be 2, it can be more than that. Note that these frequencies may not be harmonic and introduce issues. As we said in the previous example, we were testing 20 kHz versus 19 kHz, and the difference between those frequencies was 1000, which is in the audible range. So if we take the difference between 1000 and 2000, it's 1000 Hz. The difference tone is not new. It overlaps with the original 1 kHz tone and can generate 3 kHz, 4 kHz, and so on. But let's move on and make some adjustments. Let's make some changes which proves that the difference matters between those frequencies, and it needs to be within the range of available frequencies. So, okay, I increased the 1 kHz to 1.5 kHz. So the difference is 500 Hz. We should be seeing, some artifacts at 500 Hz. Let's enable the first one. I'll disable it, drive first, and the second one here. And there we go. It's strange that there's a pulsing effect going on. Maybe it's to do with the plug-in itself. Let's see what happens when we drive. Yeah, certainly. There's some pulsing effect going on, and maybe some other form of oscillation happening. We've just shown that this is correct, at least in the digital domain, that it's not just beyond human hearing range, but at any frequencies. Imagine that this is coming from just one console channel, and you have a console with 16 channels. Each have these various points which alters the signal and introduce additional frequencies which are not in the original sound that you are trying to capture, and then all are routed to the summing bus. Each channel has transformers. They are already introducing these non-linearities when you drive, and then you're multiplied by 16. When you have the aggregation, the impact is not subtle. It's clear. The setup that I've shown here is very simple. You don't need a lot of equipment or whatsoever. It can be replicated in any DAW. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this demo, please visit our website and check out the full range of profile packs. There are also free profiles available, so you can try them in your own studio setup or live rig before choosing a full pack. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next demo.